we're going to talk about attracting and retaining, once we have them in the door, top talent. Okay? We are competitive right now in the job market, especially for manufacturing jobs. We are not graduating from our tech schools or our trade schools or our colleges enough candidates to fill the positions that our baby boomers are about to leave vacant. So it's critical to get the good ones as they're coming in the door, develop our succession plan so we can grow them once we get in, and also be ready to grab the experienced ones when and if they come on the market, right? In order to attract top talent, they know they are valuable. Okay, people have been telling them that it's hard to find good manufacturing people or otherwise, Rosemary. You have to have a top-notch company. You have to have a high morale environment, and you have to have great employee engagement to attract them and keep them once they're there. Okay, so we look at what makes up. Here were all the HR managers' ears perk up. What makes a high morale environment? What attracts people? What detracts people? What keeps them happy and what keeps them unhappy? Okay, so human resources managers are very concerned with that, and company owners and leaders and managers of other areas are very concerned with what I'm about to tell you. We can directly correlate employee happiness to productivity. It's a one-to-one relationship. The happier people are, the more productive they are. So we're making money if we're keeping people happy, essentially. So that's the reason. Sometimes we don't want to go out and glad hand people. Sometimes we don't want to give them some of the benefits that they're requiring. But if we can equate that to real dollars in productivity, also lower turnover. Now we don't have to go out and recruit as much. We don't have to spend so much investment on training and development of people. It's a no-brainer move to try to work hard to keep people happy. Okay? So what are the things that make up somebody's happiness? We do a lot of employee surveys at CONNSTEP to gauge morale, put a check on it, and see where the areas of strength and weaknesses are in employee culture. And when we craft employee surveys, we're looking at a number of different dynamics and factors. So many factors that we would keep employees at a desk filling out a survey all day if we could ask a lot of questions about all of them. Okay, but we try to boil it down to some major categories. Okay, we've got quality of life, which is your physical work environment, you know, the setting in which they work, the degree of work-life balance. We're going to talk a lot about work-life balance today because we're going to talk about the Millennial generation. We've got the company practices, which are our policies, how we measure performance, the management practices of our company, our reputation. We're going to talk about mission, vision, and legacy in just a second. We've got our total reward system, which is not just pay, but it's also benefits and how we reward, recognize, and appreciate our employees. We have the work itself. Are people interested in the tasks they perform? Are they cross-trained and so they're excited about doing new and exciting things? Looking at our processes, the resources that are available to them so that they can be successful in the job that they're trying to do, and the sense of accomplishment that they have. If we look at the healthcare industry, we see that people, even though they're paid relatively less, these people are so committed and dedicated to the type of work that they do because they feel this sense of accomplishment in helping their patients that emotional and motivational driver is really high in that industry. So we have to try to capture that same feeling of passion in the manufacturing industry as well. Very critical are the people aspects. The senior leadership, the manager that the person is working for is, aside from pay, one of the most critical factors that we can use to retain or kick people out the door. Okay? John is grimacing as I say this, but the number one reason why people leave a company ain't the pay, right, Bob? It's the boss they're working for. And a great boss can anchor me right at his or her hip, even if the company next door is paying more. Okay, so it's a huge factor. Our management performance, also the coworkers. A lot of people don't want to leave because they have great relationships and great friendships with their coworkers and the customers that they work with. Okay? And lastly, we have opportunities. We just spent the morning talking about succession planning, growing, developing, cultivating the talents of people, and people love that when they see a path for growth, even in a small company. Yeah, there's not a lot, it's pretty flat in your organization, Helene. There's not a lot of room to grow up into management position, but do I have this feeling like I'm always being cross-trained, I'm always doing new things. My boss cares about me, my boss checks in with me and cares about what my future is. So if I have learning and development and career opportunities, which is hard to deliver in a small company, I'm happy and I'm satisfied. And if I'm happy and satisfied, I'm producing. I'm not at the water cooler grumbling about my boss. I'm not distracted by the fact that I think I'm paid too little, or that the Thanksgiving turkey weighed less this year than it did last year when our employer gave it to us. I'm focused on doing the work. So these are a lot of balls to keep up in the air. Can't be doing everything effectively. I want you to get your papers out again and give yourself a report card grade. I'm not going to call on you, but get real with yourself and give yourself a report card grade for those different dimensions. Okay? Maybe a letter grade from A to, we don't like to give Fs, A to F, right? It's a realistic world. A to F, how is your company doing on quality of work life? What's the environment like? Does it feel safe and clean? Okay. And you may want to flip back and forth between the previous slide. How's your organization doing at promoting work-life balance for its employees? Are we working people to the bone? Are they experiencing burnout? Or are we affording them enough freedom to have a great personal life? The work itself, is it interesting to people? Is it challenging? Does it give them a sense of reward and accomplishment? What about your policies and practices? Are they promoting happiness? Or do we have here comes a controversial term, do we have a restrictive cell phone policy that makes people feel hemmed in and unhappy and like they don't have freedom? What about our total rewards? How do we do it compensating people, giving them good benefits, giving them rewards for performance? What about opportunities for growth and development? And what about the people that they work with? Are your management ranks top of the tops so that they'll be anchoring employees to stay there and work forever? So Rosemary is saying we're really good on the work-life balance front and we're good on the passion front. I want to come back to work-life balance in a second. It's a fascinating topic. But the first impression we might give new recruits is not exactly what it might take to get them to come in the door. Sure, we can tell them people love working here, but that first impression that they see in the building itself makes a big difference when we're trying to attract people. Talking about work-life balance, so when we're going to talk about the millennial generation in just a second, but we surveyed the millennial generation. We said, here are 27 motivational factors. Which ones are most important to you? And the results were kind of interesting. Any guesses as to what number one was? Money, right? Melissa's right. I don't have any special outlandish response for you. Money was number one for them. Time off was number two, and it was a big number two, right? Flexibility, work-life balance, they're not married to the job anymore. And if we're going to demand that, they're going to look elsewhere to a company that affords them more freedom and flexibility. So that's really tough. In a traditional manufacturing environment, you come in on your set shift, you put your head down, you get your allotted days off, and we thank you, and you go on your way. So it's hard to get creative inside of that and afford people flexibility and work-life balance that looks different from what's being offered down the street. So we allow a little freedom with using the cell phone. That makes people happy. They get to be entertained on the job. But if it's rampant texting, we're going to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, right? So that feels like a little bit of flexibility. Anybody else doing anything particularly flexible or particularly to respond to the work-life balance issue that looks special? This is one of the nice things about being a small company. We get to have a little freedom and a little flexibility. We get to know Mary's kid, Mary's personal life. It makes it tough to deliver tough news or make the tough calls later. But we get to say, Mary, get out of here. Go see your daughter in the school play. Get her to practice early. And we have the freedom to be able to kind of loosen up on policy. When you get bigger, you lose that freedom. Anybody have a bigger company getting up into the 200 employee range, 300 employee range? Now we have to make policy. You just have to. You just need more structure as you get bigger. But one of the great attractors and the great thing about being a small company is you get to be a little looser, and that makes people happy. When you make a policy, like cell phone use, now you're married to it. For compliance reasons, we have to live to that policy. So even if Patrick's wife is ill, we have to enforce that policy evenly with Patrick than we do with Donald, who wants to check the score of the Sox game, right? So when you make policy, you have to enforce it, so you're almost hemming yourself in. So we'd like a little bit of freedom and flexibility, but that means we have to build up our managers to be able to deal with that person who's on the cell phone effectively instead of getting frustrated and just walking by and ignoring it. Okay, good. So we get some flex time is an interesting concept. A lot of employers get a little nervous about it because we want to make sure the shift is covered and that customer demand can be fulfilled, right? So I'm surprised to hear you say that you allow people to flex from day to day. A more common practice when people make the jump to flex time is that we'll say, okay, we have these core business hours. We're 6 to 6. I don't care where you get your 8 to 10 in, but they got to be within the core hours, and it has to be the same schedule every week. Okay? So Jennifer can't come in at 10 one day and 6 the next. That seems to work for a lot of smaller businesses. So if you're not doing that kind of schedule, that may be a good first move for you to move to a feeling of more flexibility. Okay? Anybody experience with a 980 schedule or hear about this, 980 schedule? I'll throw another curveball at you. But this essentially says that over the course of 2 weeks, you're going to get every other Friday off. You're going to work longer shifts for the other 9 days. So what does it feel like to the employee when they hear about this benefit? What's the perception? I get an extra day off. That's what it feels like. Even though they're putting in their time, I get an extra day off. Now I can do my personal stuff. Now I can go to the Yankee game. We got to be fair here. Now I can go to the Yankee game. Now I have freedom and flexibility. It feels like a huge benefit. Plus, from the employer's side, where's my controller? We get to turn the lights off on Friday, every other Friday. We're lowering our overhead costs. So it's a little bit of financial savings for the business as well. Something to consider. Planners go nuts with that idea. That sounds like I can't meet customer demand. It takes a change in how you're going to plan the work and organize the work and how you're going to deal with your customer demand. But it can be a benefit that would attract this millennial generation that we know. That's the number 2 motivator, right, Melissa? They love freedom and flexibility. And if you want to get them in the door and retain them, that's another step you can take. So anything, flex time, anything that bends a little to let them go and take care of their personal life, or anything that's kind of a step beyond that, like a 980 schedule, is going to be a big attractor. Karen says, summer hours for a set period of the year from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So people are still getting in the full shift. It's just that they start earlier and end earlier. Everyone. Engineering to the shop, everybody is on those hours. So again, we have no change in the number of hours worked, but we have the perception that I can get out and play. Is it every day? Every day they get out early? Or just Fridays? Every day. Okay. How do employees like work from home? They love it. They go bananas for work from home opportunity. How do managers like work from home? They hate it. Right? Unless they're doing it themselves. Why do managers hate work from home so much? It's worth scratching your head over, at least. So maybe we're talking about just on Fridays, not every day of the week. So our teamwork's probably covered, right? If we're worried that we can't monitor and effectively oversee the performance, we could start measuring and collecting data, right? Metrics, okay? If we're worried about that Cheryl's going to slack while she's home and walk her dog and take care of her kids the whole time, which is a real fear we have, what do we do about that? Comes down to performance. Do I care as long as she's hitting her metrics? First, I'm liberal in this area. But I also have to get some confidence. Remember, we're talking about the caliber of our management. In my ability to deal with, where's EJ? The EJs of the world, underperformer Cheryl, if, I'll let him off the hook. Underperformer Cheryl, in a confident and competent way as a boss. That's not a reason not to go to a flexible schedule and make my other 90% of my employees happy because of that fear or insecurity. But it doesn't work for every environment, and it doesn't work for every job. You got to have the technology, you got to have the culture, you got to have the management skill set, you got to have a lot of things in place in order to pull that off. I'm in favor of micromanaging new employees. Telling them that that's exactly what I'm going to do so I don't turn them off, but spending a lot of intensive time with new employees from the get-go. So I would bring a new employee into the office for a designated period of time. 3 months, 6 months, whatever the learning curve is to get up to speed on that job. And I'm not a fan of 100% work from home as somebody who works from home. I'm not a fan of 100% of that because I think you do lose some of the cohesiveness. Do you agree, Helene? When you get these IT is very popular in the IT industry, but they become satellites and there's a disconnection from the company. But I'm intrigued by the idea of every Friday or every other Friday. And I think you would be able to then to maximize the morale benefit you're going to get from that, but also not sacrifice productivity. You're nodding your head, might you agree? Yep. Okay. Interesting topic. It's something we should spend extra time considering because it is that big motivator of the millennial generation. We're not going to be able to avoid this and say, no, we can't do flex scheduling or work from home. We're seeing even small companies, so now we're talking about total rewards. Look at what you gave your company a grade for total rewards. We're seeing a move away from hourly or base pay oriented pay toward more of a combination of base plus variable pay. So base plus bonus in some form or fashion, for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a great tool to motivate desired behavior. Okay, so if we get a lot of scrap in our shop, and I want to cut down on the scrap, start rewarding people for cutting down on scrap, and it happens. How long does it take for it to happen, Melissa? Immediately. Okay, people respond immediately to, because we know money's the number one motivator. So if I want desired behavior, I craft a bonus plan or a variable compensation plan that motivates that specific behavior. The other thing that companies like about it is now I'm less financially on the hook, back to the finances, less financially on the hook for giving my entire workforce a pay increase. Okay? Now instead I'm paying for performance, and I know if there's performance, then the money's in the coffer. Okay? So instead, now I'm not giving the 50-cent raise to the whole workforce, or the worse yet, the 3% raise that compounds year after year after year. So it minimizes our long-term financial commitment to the employee base in favor of these shorter pops of payout that should be funded by the improved productivity. We have to be careful with that, though. So I was just at EJ, and I have a company in Putnam, and they have a very high morale, 90% morale on their employee survey. Haven't seen that in a while. Very high morale environment. Great successful bonus program, but we were seeing remarks on the employee survey that said it's a blaming environment. One of the few black marks on their survey was that people are pointing blame. So we pull some focus groups together and we say, tell me more about this blame. And they told us very thematically, very solidly, it's the bonus program because when you make an error, you're docked $5 from your bonus bucket. So what do you suppose people are doing when they make an error? Hiding it, which is not what we want. We don't want to hide mistakes, right? Continuous improvement. We want to reveal mistakes. And also, if I couldn't hide it, what am I going to do? Mario did it. Okay? So there's our blame. So how do you fix that? Do we throw out the bonus program? Absolutely not. The company's booming because productivity's on the rise since they implemented the bonus program. But let's tweak the bonus program. Instead of docking people for making errors, let's pay them for promoting ideas that benefit cross-functional processes. We have to work out the kinks yet. But it's just changing the payout to motivate the desired behavior. We were motivating the wrong behavior. Now we want to motivate the desired behavior. So bonus program, it's got some kinks in it. It takes a little while to work it out, right? Okay. And our younger generation, they don't care as much about the 401k, but they love that bonus check coming twice a year. It's money right in the pocket. And I'm going to tell you, they're financially unstable, so money There's a reason why money is so important to. Yeah. We got our quality of life. We got our work itself. We have our company practices, our total rewards, the opportunities for growth and development. We just talked in our succession planning session. And the people itself, your management ranks are so important. If they're homegrown, they're really skilled, really knowledgeable, but maybe not necessarily the most robust, exceptional people managers. So we got to get them trained, or we got to get them in the right position. Not always the best, you've heard this ad nauseum, not always the best cog maker makes the best boss of cog makers. You really got to look at yourselves and figure out strategically who we want to promote and why into these positions. Beyond that, bigger picture stuff. How are we going to attract people to our company? The value of having a clear and effective mission, which is what we do, our purpose for existing, and also articulate what that means. She's an employee in the company. She knows what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. Okay? So she's connected to the work. She understands the mission of the company. That's going to help her independently make decisions on behalf of the company. Also, if she's a member of the management team, it's going to help drive the decisions about the strategic direction of the company. So mission is important. We want to connect all of our employees. We want to have a mission, and we want to connect our employees with it because it helps them when they're independent, even working on the machine, make smart decisions about their job. Okay? We also want to have a vision. Difference between mission and vision. Mission is about what we're doing in the here and now for whom, and vision is our view of where we're going. Anybody have a vision statement in your organization? What you aspire to be? I have a client that makes kitchen cabinetry. That's their mission, custom kitchen cabinetry. Their vision is to bring families together in health and happiness, right? That's inspiring. Okay, maybe not every employee that walks in the door, but some employees can really connect with that and have passion about what I do for work. And when people can connect with your vision and where you're going, and we communicate it, and we relay it to people, they get entrenched with you and they want to stay. Because this company is doing something, we're going somewhere, we're making things happen, and I'm not going to jump to the next company that's just a building where they make cabinets. Okay? These are important. Also, your legacy. What are you going to leave behind? What's the history of the company? Is this powerful? You have a reputation in your town, right, for what you do, especially in small towns. People want to say they're proud to work for the button company. Okay, that happens. This company happens to be in a small town. Everybody knows this company, and they have pride in working there. Okay, that lends to the reputation. I do a lot of recruiting. I'll see people posting their resumes from the same companies over and over and over and over again. High turnover, and that word gets around. And then anybody who's really good, that really great tool maker, is going to know, I don't want to go to banana company, because that's not the place to work. So you have to have these things shored up in order to be able to attract the best. Okay, so we've been talking about the different generations. By 2020, we're going to have 5 generations in the workforce. And they're all slightly different. Now I'm going to give a caveat here. We're about to complain about the millennial generation. Everybody does. But as long as I've been doing this, and I'm not telling you how long that is, but it's been for at least a generation, the older generation has complained about it, the younger generation. There is nothing new here. John, you're laughing. As long as I can remember, the baby boomers said that Gen X were too independent, they didn't work hard. Gen X says that millennial generation is this, and that. Okay, so we have to put context around this. That being said, the millennial generation does have some unique characteristics that we want to cover. And then we also are now on the lookout for the next one's called Gen 2020. Have you heard of this, Susan? Gen 2020? They're coming up behind. They're just starting to get into the workforce. We're watching them. Right now, we're painting with them with the same brush as we do the millennials. But traditionalists, they grew up in the era of depression. So save, conserve. They grew up in the era where children were taught not to speak. Don't speak, children are best seen but not heard, which is totally counter to how millennials were brought up, right? How millennials were brought up with a voice, a choice, input on everything, reward for everything, Positive reinforcement all day long. Trophy for every little league game they show up to and get out of the car for. Okay? So they're a very different profile than their older counterparts. Okay? But before we get to them, let's just take a look at it. So you've got traditionalists, Susan, are retiring, or they're thinking about it. They should, right? What they're going to take with them, they're going to take with them stability. These are the people that are going to show up day in and day out, snowstorm or not. They're not worried about any VPN line at home. They're going to show up to the shop. Okay? Attention to detail, loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. They're not going to hop for 50 cents an hour. They're not going to hop because their boss asked them to do something they didn't think they were supposed to do. They're going to be there with you forever. So those are great. They're notoriously resistant to change. Try to introduce new technology. Guys, I'm stereotyping all day long. Of course, not all traditionalists are like this, okay? Resistant to change, reluctant to buck the system or speak up, okay? And hesitant to disagree. Some of that's kind of good, but it doesn't exactly evoke change or innovation in an environment. Then the baby boomers come along right after them. These are the protesters of the 60s. We like a little change. We like to buck the system a little bit. They brought the idea of ambition, personal growth, individuality, personal growth to the system. They are driven. They're willing to go the extra mile, good at relationships, willing to please. They can be a little sensitive, though, stereotypically speaking, overly judgmental, not necessarily budget-minded, okay? Then comes Gen X. Gen X is important because as your baby boomers exit rapidly, who's going to take the management ranks? Gen X. They're moving up. And they're moving up maybe before they're quite ready, before they're fully cultivated. That's why succession planning is so important. Get your Gen Xers ready now to manage. Get Diane ready to go to move into that director of sales and marketing role before baby boomer retires. Okay? Tech savvy. Here comes tech savviness for the first time into the workplace. Very individualistic, self-reliant, not necessarily team-oriented. Pragmatic, logical, very logical decision makers. Not exactly the touchy-feely managers that I've kind of been purporting. I want you to connect with your employees. We want managers that anchor employees there and have great relationships. This is not necessarily the strength of Gen X. They can be impatient and cynical as well. Obviously, it's not true of all Gen Xers, but some have poor people skills. Okay? So those are the generations before us, and understanding that style is going to be important to understanding where the blockages are when we try to manage this millennial generation that looks different. Okay? Who are the millennials born in the 80s and 90s? They're under about, younger 30s, 20s in your workplace. There are three key things that drive how they behave. They grew up with technology. They are financially insecure. And they were raised by helicopter parents. You ever hear this term before? This is probably the biggest factor with why we're having trouble. Why do we care so much? They're coming into our workforce in droves. They're going to make up a big part of the pie for you pretty soon. Okay? So they grew up with technology. They grew up with cell phones. So they grew up with mobile technology. Access to information everywhere they go for every minute of every day. Okay? What does that mean? They have always multitasked. What does that mean for their attention span? If I'm stereotyping, it's shot, right? They like to hop from job to job. So Helene says, let's at least give them some cross-training to try to harness that attention span and keep them interested and keep them focused. So they've always multitasked. They're really quite independent from you in that they're resourceful. So if they have a question, they don't necessarily run to their manager to get it asked. What do if they want to know how to do something? They Google it. Okay? So we like that. That's a real asset. They also have networks. At 23 years old, they have a good network of people that they know, right? How do they know everybody? Facebook or whatever the latest, Instagram, Snapchat. So they know a lot of people. So if Google doesn't provide the information, they know somebody who might be able to provide it. This is actually an asset. We should be wanting to mobilize this a little bit more. And we should appreciate that about them, that they're not tied to our hip trying to give us information. But that's not to say that they're not dependent. They're quite dependent. So we'll get to that in a second. They're socially connected and well networked. Their attention span is shorter than that of their predecessors. So that may be is that a frustration for a baby boomer manager? All day long. They just don't get it. So here's the challenge. We're probably not going to change them, how they're made. We can try to enforce it. But I might say, instead, we may need to change our management style, how we're approaching them, so that we can attract them, retain them, keep them happy, and if we keep them happy, we keep them productive. It's annoying, but we're going to have to change ourselves, right, Melissa? They ain't going to change around us. They're going to have to teach us how to manage them. Economically, I said they're financially unstable. If they went to college, they have student loan debt. Even if they didn't go to college, they have credit card debt. So what does that mean when the shop down the street offers 50 cents more an hour? They're hopping. They're hopping for money unless what? What do we have in our arsenal that'll keep them? Benefits, flexibility, bonus, great boss that I'm loyal to and I don't want to leave. This is how we can combat this, because they will hop for money. They need the money. Okay? There's a gap. We got some statistics here. The percentage employed right now is low relative to other generations. The gap between what they're making and what we're making is big. Okay? They're actually dropping in earnings overall. And if the economy improves and somebody else can offer them more money, they're going to leave. So it's a good idea to benchmark what you're paying against other organizations and be in the know about that, so you know where you're vulnerable to. We should celebrate that to some extent. They're engaged. They're involved, right? We don't want employees that are just going to shut their brain off and do what we say. That's the old model. The old model is patriarchy. Senior level bosses say, don't think, just do what I tell you and do it the way I tell you to do. And then we get frustrated because people aren't independent or aren't empowered or not accountable. So we have this engaged workforce. We just have to harness them and kind of let them know where that entitlement begins and ends. But they definitely want to be participative. They grew up with a lot of coaching and feedback. The hovering parent is involved heavily in their life, giving a lot of praise all the time. So they come to expect that when they have a boss. So if I'm a baby boomer boss or a millennial boss that's not so great with the people skills and I ignore you, that's foreign and a real turnoff to a Gen Y employee. Okay? So they are used to constant coaching and feedback. They expect that to continue in the workplace. They don't need it to be time-consuming. They don't need a 3-hour-long review every 6 months. In fact, they like quick shots. Even text message feedback is fine. Some people are unemployed and wrongly employed, and in the general job market as well. So this statistic is going to point to people who are gainfully employed in a desired field. So it may look a little lower. And this is not to say that they're not hardworking, or there are plenty of millennials out there willing to work 2 jobs, not entitled, willing to put in the work and move up the ladder appropriately. But there's just they come out of school and they weren't automatically offered 4 jobs in their desired field, and so they have to bounce around a little bit. They're naturally collaborative. They like to have boundaries. They like metrics and measurements. So if you're a lean environment or a metrics-driven culture, they're going to feel comfortable with that because they like to know where they stand at all times. They like that feedback. And they want to work in an environment that is comfortable. They don't want you to criticize them, which may be culturally opposite of what you're used to doing. Okay, they develop a commitment to individuals, including their boss. So I'm getting like a broken record on that one here. But if we can get that boss relationship and that loyalty, we'll cut our 2-year hop period to maybe 5 years. Here's the difference, older versus younger. Generation X, these are your managers, more command and control, more individually focused versus the collaborative style of millennials. Gen X is working for income. Gen Y is working for income plus this personal enrichment, the feeling of contributed to a greater societal good. Gen X likes structure. Millennials are more flexible. So here's the ultimate question that we have to get introspective. What are you doing in your company that's working against the motivators of millennials or toward the motivators of millennials? We know about all these factors. What's our management style? Are we top-down and patriarchal, or are we bottom-up and inclusive? Are we flexible wherever we can be with our benefits package to really tap into the key motivators? Are we including them in decision maker? All these factors, how are we doing at managing this workforce? Now, this concept of benefits is really interesting. So right now the rage is PTO, right? Paid time off. A big pot. The idea is great. We don't care how you use it. We trust you to be adults. You want to take it for vacation or take your dog to the vet, whatever you want to do. Freedom. Here's your pot of time. Employees hate PTO. Any guess why? When we get employee survey results, they don't like PTO. It doesn't make any sense. When they have to stay home with a sick child, what are they perceiving is happening? I'm taking away from my vacation. Okay? So sometimes you have perception problems with your benefits, and I think maybe what you're dealing with is a misperception of the benefit. I would prefer, especially small company, fewer policies rather than more, right? Because once we have the policy, we have to follow it. So if Dorian's child is sick and she really needs to be on the phone in order to get it resolved and get back to concentrating on work, I want to be able to allow her to do that. Also, I don't want to punish all for the sins of a few. How many of your employees are actually abusing the cell phone policy? 11%. Count your employees, I'll tell you it's 11%. I'll try to dazzle you. 50%. Okay, then maybe we got a perception problem. But you're always going to have a small group of employees that kind of really ruin it. And they're the reasons why we write policy. Okay? So we don't want to have to punish all for the sins of a few. But that means that we have to get good at managing tyranny when she's on the cell phone too much. Or let's pile on bigger expectations. If Lewis has time to be on the cell phone that much, maybe he's got idle time that we could fill with more productivity. Okay? So I think, at least in a smaller operation, I'd like to see you manage that problem rather than create policy. That being said, sometimes it's so big and managing is such a hard job, we need to give our managers a little help in the form of policy that they can stand against. So I'm 90% of the way there, but I understand that policy has the right place. So Tierney says cell phone use is driven culturally. They rely on heavy use in their company because it helps them get business done. But we have lines that we draw. You can't sacrifice safety, so you really make it, you go to work for your culture. It doesn't mean you don't have people that are abusing it and using it for the wrong reasons. And again, we kind of tackle those on a case-by-case basis and build our managers up in their confidence and their skill set to be able to deal with that problem if and when it happens, instead of blanketing all of us with the penalty of not being able to use our cell phone. When you get bigger, when you get up into 200 employees, you need policy. It'll get away from you too much. Then we get into favoritism and all that kind of stuff. When you get bigger, you need policy in a number of different ways. But if you're small, it might be better to manage it on a case-by-case basis. Plus, we're trying to treat people like adults. And if we wag our finger and say, they know all, but we can't punish the ones that do, right? Yeah. Maybe get in there a little closer, see how they're using it, diagnose it a little more. And if you really do have 50% abusing it, then you may have a little management issue more so than tough to manage that. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, policy doesn't solve all the problems either. You still have to talk to people. So we're better brushing up our skill set at talking to people and motivating them for accountability. Okay. Very good. Thank you so much. Great discussion.